The night had not always been this quiet, and neither had he. Months earlier, under a sky the color of burnt copper and dust that clung to the back of your throat, Caleb Hayes had first seen the dog that would refuse to leave him, not as a partner, not as a trained unit, but as something far more deliberate. Something that chose him before he understood what that meant. The outpost sat miles from anything resembling a town, a stretch of dry earth and low structures humming with generators and routine, where days blurred together under heat that rose well past 100 degrees and nights dropped into a silence so complete it pressed against your ears. Caleb had been walking the perimeter at dusk, boots grinding against gravel, the air carrying the faint scent of diesel and distant smoke, when he noticed movement near the far fence line, subtle, controlled, not the erratic shift of wind or debris, but something alive and watching. The German shepherd stood there, just beyond the reach of the floodlights, lean and still, his coat catching the last light in shades of sable and shadow, ears forward, eyes locked with a focus that felt less like curiosity and more like recognition. Caleb did not call out. He did not reach for anything. He simply stopped, studying the animal the way you study a memory you are not sure you own yet. "You lost, buddy," he said quietly, his voice steady but low, the kind of tone you use when you are not trying to command, only to understand. The dog did not move closer, but he did not leave either, and in that narrow space between distance and trust, something settled, something unspoken that neither of them broke. Over the next few days, the dog returned, always at the edges, always watching, never begging, never approaching the others who passed through the same ground with louder steps and quicker judgments. Caleb started bringing water, setting it down without stepping forward, letting the silence do the work, and each time he walked away, he could feel those eyes on his back, steady, measuring, as if the decision had already been made and only time needed to catch up. On the fourth evening, the dog stepped into the light, slow, deliberate, every movement controlled, closing the distance one careful stride at a time until he stood just within arm's reach, close enough for Caleb to see the fine scars along his flank, the faint outline of a collar that had once been there and was now only a memory pressed into fur. Caleb knelt, not reaching yet, letting the moment stretch, letting the dog decide, and when Rex finally lowered his head and pressed it lightly against Caleb's hand, it was not submission, it was something closer to agreement. A quiet understanding passed without words, without training, without command. From that night on, Rex did not linger at the edges anymore, and Caleb did not walk alone, and though no one wrote it down, no one signed it, no one gave it a name, something had already been promised in that silence. Something that would not be broken even when everything else tried to pull them apart. It happens on a morning that feels no different from the others, which is how moments like this always arrive, quiet, unannounced, wrapped in routine, so no one sees them coming until it is too late to call them ordinary. The sun has barely climbed above the horizon, casting long, pale light across the outpost, the air still cool enough to carry sound farther than it should, and Caleb walks his usual path along the perimeter with Rex at his side, their steps in rhythm, steady, familiar, almost mechanical in their consistency. There is a stillness in the air that presses just slightly harder than usual, not enough for anyone else to notice, not enough to raise alarm, but enough for Rex to slow, just a fraction, his ears lifting higher, his body tightening with a focus that does not match the calm around them. Caleb feels it before he understands it, the subtle shift in the dog's posture, the way the leash remains slack, but the space between them changes, charged now with something unspoken. Something that hums beneath the surface like a distant vibration you can feel but cannot hear. What is it? Caleb murmurs, his voice low, more instinct than question, and Rex does not respond with movement, only with stillness, a deeper kind of alertness that seems to reach beyond the visible, beyond the measurable, into something that cannot be explained in a report or a briefing. The wind moves lightly across the ground, carrying dust and the faint scent of metal and heat. And for a moment everything feels suspended, as if time itself has paused to listen. Then Rex steps forward, not pulling, not forcing, but guiding, a deliberate shift in direction that breaks the pattern they have followed for weeks, leading Caleb a few yards off the usual path toward a stretch of ground that looks no different from any other, flat, dry, unremarkable to the eye. Caleb hesitates, just long enough to register the deviation, then follows, because by now the trust between them does not require explanation, only action. Rex stops, stands firm, and looks back, not with urgency, not with fear, but with certainty, the kind that does not waver, and Caleb feels something settle in his chest, a quiet acknowledgement that whatever this is, it matters. He takes one step closer, then another, his boots pressing into the dirt, the sound dull and controlled, and without thinking he reaches out, resting his hand briefly against Rex's shoulder, grounding himself in the steady presence that has never led him wrong. "All right," he says softly, more to himself than to the dog, and together they pause there, just outside the line of routine, just beyond the edge of what is expected, standing in a moment that will not reveal its meaning until later. A moment that will divide everything that came before from everything that follows. Behind them, the outpost continues as it always does, voices rising, engines turning, the day beginning without interruption, unaware that a quiet decision has just been made, a step taken slightly off course, guided not by command or protocol, but by a bond that listens to something deeper, something that does not speak in words, but still finds a way to be heard. What follows is not loud, not chaotic, not the kind of moment that announces itself with noise, but it changes everything just the same. Caleb stands where Rex stopped, the ground beneath his boots looking no different from the rest of the dry stretch that surrounds the outpost, yet something in the air feels altered, like a breath held too long, like a sentence waiting for its final word. He studies the space in front of him, scanning slowly, deliberately, the way he has been trained to do, but it is not training that brought him here, it is trust, and that difference settles deep in his chest as he lowers himself carefully, one knee pressing into the dirt, his hand brushing lightly across the surface, as if he might feel something hidden just beneath. Rex does not move. He remains still, ears forward, eyes locked, his entire body aligned with a quiet certainty that does not waver, and in that stillness there is no fear, only purpose, only the unwavering sense that this place matters for reasons that have not yet revealed themselves. "You saw something," Caleb murmurs, not questioning, not doubting, just acknowledging, and the words hang in the warm air before fading into the silence. A faint glint catches his eye then, subtle, almost nothing, just a small irregularity in the dirt a few inches ahead, something that does not belong to the natural pattern of the ground, and Caleb's breath slows as he leans closer, brushing away a thin layer of dust with careful fingers until the edge of something metallic reveals itself, dull under the rising light. He stops immediately, not from fear, but from understanding, because some discoveries are not meant to be rushed, and some moments require stillness to be fully seen. Behind him, the distant sounds of the outpost continue, boots on gravel, voices calling out, engines turning over, but here, in this narrow pocket of space, everything feels contained, focused. As if the world has drawn a circle around this exact point and asked them to stand inside it together. Caleb rises slowly, stepping back with measured control, his hand resting briefly on Rex's shoulder again, grounding himself in the steady presence beside him. "Good call," he says quietly, the words simple, but carrying weight far beyond their sound, because this was not luck, and it was not coincidence, it was something earned, something built over days and nights of silent understanding, something that had just revealed its purpose in the most understated way possible. Rex exhales softly, a small release of breath that seems to carry the tension out of his frame, though his eyes never leave the spot, never fully let go, as if the responsibility has not ended, only shifted. Within minutes, others arrive, drawn by Caleb's signal, their movements quicker now, more alert, but when they look at him, and then at the dog, there is a pause, a recognition that passes between them without words. The quiet acknowledgement that what happened here did not begin with procedure, it began with a bond no one had written into any manual. And as Caleb steps back, Giving space for the process to unfold, his gaze drifts to Rex again, to the steady posture, to the calm that has returned, and something settles deeper than relief, something closer to realization. That this connection between them is not just about walking side by side, not just about presence or proximity, but about listening to what cannot be seen, trusting what cannot be explained, and following it, even when it leads you just a few steps off the path. Because sometimes those few steps are the difference between what happens and what does not, between what is missed and what is found, between a life lived on routine and a moment that quietly changes everything. The night settles deeper than usual, carrying a stillness that feels almost deliberate, as if the world itself has chosen to quiet down and listen, and Caleb remains seated long after the others have drifted inside. Long after the last voices fade into low murmurs behind canvas walls, long after the hum of the generators becomes the only constant sound left to mark the passage of time. Rex stays with him, not shifting, not wandering, his presence as steady as the ground beneath them, and for a while neither of them moves, as if motion might break something fragile that has just begun to take shape. The sky stretches wide above, filled with stars sharp and distant, and the air has cooled enough to carry the faint scent of dust and metal in softer tones, less harsh now, more reflective, like the memory of a long day rather than the weight of it. Caleb exhales slowly, the breath leaving him in a quiet stream, and he leans forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his gaze unfocused, somewhere between the ground at his feet and the horizon he cannot see in the dark. "You knew," he says finally, the words low, almost lost to the night, and Rex lifts his head slightly, not in response, but in acknowledgement, as if the statement itself holds enough truth to be recognized without question. There is no answer in words, no explanation offered, but Caleb does not need one, not anymore, because something has shifted inside him, something that has moved from doubt into understanding without ever passing through logic. He reaches down again, letting his hand rest against Rex's shoulder, feeling the warmth there, the quiet strength that does not ask for recognition, and for a moment he closes his eyes, not from fatigue, but from the need to hold on to the feeling before it fades into routine. It is not just about what happened earlier, not just about the place they stopped or the decision they made. It is about the way it happened, the way Rex sensed something beyond sight, the way trust replaced hesitation without hesitation itself being acknowledged. And Caleb realizes that this is not something he was taught, not something he trained for, but something he has been given, something that cannot be measured or replicated, only accepted. A faint breeze moves through the outpost, brushing lightly against them, stirring loose dust along the ground, and Rex turns his head briefly, ears shifting to follow the sound before settling again, always aware, always present, never fully at rest. And Caleb watches him with a different kind of attention now, not just seeing the dog beside him, but recognizing the quiet force that has been guiding them both all along. "If I miss it," Caleb murmurs, his voice softer now, edged with something closer to confession than command, "you do not." The words linger in the space between them, not as a question, not even as a statement, but as an acceptance of something deeper, something already proven. Rex exhales slowly, his body easing just enough to signal calm, and in that small release there is an answer, simple and complete, one that does not need to be spoken to be understood. The night continues around them unchanged, indifferent to the realization unfolding in its midst, and yet for Caleb, something has been rewritten, something that will follow him beyond this place, beyond these days, into whatever comes next. He does not know how or when that will matter again, only that it will, because bonds like this do not exist without purpose, and promises like this do not remain silent forever. They wait, they endure, and when the moment comes, they rise again, just as steady, just as certain, just as unbreakable as the presence beside him now. Morning arrives without ceremony, the kind of pale light that slips quietly over the edges of the horizon and settles into the bones before anyone notices it has come, and the outpost begins to wake in fragments, a door opening somewhere, boots meeting gravel, the low murmur of voices returning to shape the day. Caleb rises before most, not out of habit alone, but because something inside him no longer lets him sleep through the early stillness, and Rex is already awake when he stands, already watching, already aligned with whatever the day might bring. There is no command given, no signal exchanged, and yet they move together, stepping into the morning air with the same quiet certainty that has begun to define everything between them. The ground feels familiar beneath his boots, the same stretch of earth, the same lines of routine, but Caleb senses the difference now, not in what he sees, but in how he listens, in how he allows the silence to speak before he fills it with thought. They walk the perimeter again, tracing the path that once felt fixed and predictable, but now holds a subtle openness, a willingness to shift, to change, to follow something beyond what is expected. Rex stays close, not leading, not lagging, simply present, his awareness extending outward like an invisible field that touches everything before Caleb ever reaches it. A few yards ahead, the light catches the ground in a way that draws Caleb's attention, not because it is unusual, but because it feels familiar, like a memory echoing back into the present, and he slows, just slightly, enough for Rex to notice, enough for the rhythm between them to adjust without breaking. There is no immediate discovery this time, no clear sign or object waiting to be revealed, only the quiet act of pausing, of choosing to stand still in a place that might hold meaning or might not, and, for the first time, Caleb understands that it is not always about finding something. Sometimes it is about honoring the instinct that tells you where to look. "We do not rush it," he says softly, the words more grounded now, less uncertain, and Rex remains beside him, steady as ever, the space between them filled with a calm that does not need validation. The sun climbs higher, warming the air, stretching shadows into shorter shapes, and the outpost behind them grows louder, more active, pulling the day into motion whether they are ready or not, but Caleb does not feel pulled. Anymore, not in the same way, because something inside him has shifted from reacting to listening, from following orders to recognizing something quieter that moves alongside them. He glances down at Rex, at the way the dog stands without tension, without doubt, and for a brief moment, Caleb feels something that he cannot fully name, something close to gratitude, but deeper, more anchored. As if he has been given access to a language he is only beginning to understand. "Whatever it is," he murmurs, almost to himself, "we will hear it." And though the words are simple, they carry a weight that settles into the morning, into the light, into the path ahead, because they are no longer just hope, they are a continuation of something already proven, something that does not need to announce itself to be real. Around them, the day unfolds as it always does, measured in tasks and movement and time, but within that structure, Caleb and Rex move differently now, not separate from it, but connected to something deeper within it. Something that will guide them again when the moment comes, something that does not fade with daylight, but waits patiently, quietly, for the next time it is needed. By the time the rotation ends, the air feels different, not because the place has changed, but because he has, and that difference follows Caleb quietly, settling into his steps, into the way he carries himself as he prepares to leave the outpost behind. The morning of departure comes without drama, just the low rumble of engines warming, gear being loaded, voices calling out names and numbers that mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, and, through it all, Rex remains exactly where he has always been, close enough to touch, far enough to move freely, never needing to be told where to stand. The sky is clear, stretching wide and open, the kind of sky that makes distance feel both endless and reachable at the same time, and Caleb takes a moment before stepping forward, his gaze moving across the familiar ground, the paths they walked, the places that now hold more meaning than they did before. He does not say goodbye in words, because some places are not meant to be spoken to that way, and instead he rests his hand briefly against Rex's shoulder, the same gesture he has used without thinking, now carrying a deeper weight, a quiet acknowledgement of everything that has passed between them without ever being named. "We keep going," he says, and the words are simple, but they do not sound like an order. They sound like a promise continuing, something already in motion that does not need to be started again. The journey home is long, measured in miles and hours that blur together, the hum of transport engines replacing the silence of the desert, the landscape shifting from dry earth to something greener, softer, more familiar to those who have been away too long. Through it all, Rex stays close, adjusting to each new space without hesitation, his awareness never fading, as if the change in surroundings does not alter the connection that guides him. When they arrive back on American soil, the air carries a different scent, one of rain and grass and distance softened by time, and for a moment, Caleb pauses again, letting it settle into him, letting the transition complete itself in silence. People move around them, families reuniting, voices rising with relief and emotion, but Caleb does not rush forward, not yet, because something in him knows that what he carries now is not meant to be left behind in the noise of arrival. Rex stands beside him, steady as ever, eyes scanning, not for threat, not for command, but simply present, exactly as he has always been, and in that presence, Caleb feels it clearly for the first time, not as a thought, not as a question, but as something settled, something final. He does not need to understand every moment that brought them here. He does not need to explain how it works or why it feels the way it does. He only needs to recognize it for what it is. A bond that does not loosen with distance, a promise that does not fade when the mission ends, something that stays, quietly, faithfully, in every step forward. As he finally moves, stepping into the life waiting beyond the gates, Rex moves with him, not behind, not ahead, but exactly where he belongs, and though no one around them may see it, though no one may hear it spoken. There is something undeniable in the way they walk, in the way they remain together without effort, without question, as if the space between them has been closed permanently, as if the silence itself has become a vow. And in that silence, there is no need for explanation, no need for words, because some promises are not meant to be heard, only kept. In a quiet hospital hallway where time seems to stand still, a wounded Marine lies between life and memory while his loyal German shepherd refuses to leave his side, creating one of the most powerful animal stories ever told about trust, instinct, and an unbreakable bond. This deeply emotional journey follows the Marine and his shepherd from a distant military outpost to the silent corridors of recovery, where their connection is not built on commands, but on something far greater, something that moves beyond words and into the realm of faith and presence. Among the most touching animal stories, this narrative reveals how a German shepherd chose his Marine long before loyalty was expected, sensing what others could not and guiding him through moments that would quietly change everything. As the days unfold under harsh sun and quiet nights, the Marine learns to listen not just with his ears, but with his heart, discovering that some bonds are not trained but given, and that true companionship does not ask for recognition, only trust. This is one of those rare animal stories where every step, every pause, and every silent glance carries meaning, showing how a shepherd's instinct can lead a Marine exactly where he needs to be before danger ever arrives, without noise, without fear, only certainty. When the mission ends and the world shifts from desert silence to the noise of home, the bond remains unchanged, proving that the strongest connections do not fade with distance or time, and that some promises are never spoken, only lived. Among unforgettable animal stories, this story stands as a testament to the quiet miracles that happen when loyalty meets purpose, where a Marine and his shepherd walk side by side not out of duty, but because neither of them knows how to walk alone anymore, through every mile traveled and every breath shared. This is one of those animal stories that reminds us that the deepest connections are not explained, they are felt. And sometimes, the most powerful promises are the ones made in silence and kept forever. Character 1. A 34-year-old white U.S. Marine male, front-facing portrait, short military haircut, light stubble, strong jawline. Wearing standard Marine combat uniform with dog tags, intense calm expression, realistic lighting, cinematic detail, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2, a 6-year-old German Shepherd dog, full body visible, standing alert, sable black and tan coat, muscular build, upright ears, Amber eyes, calm focused posture, realistic lighting, cinematic detail, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration.